Get started. My name is Chris Gardner. I'm on the board of the fans group, and we have a really cool logo. There's some around the room. We have a real cool newsletter. We have an amazing membership base who generally pay their membership on time. And then it falls to one person in a group to call all the delinquent people. Who does that, Sue? Oh, well, anyway. We advocate for the river. It's right over here, the Deschutes River, primarily Crooked River, sections of it over here, and White's Creek. But this is a river in crisis. And in a sense, we're kind of taking the crisis out to one end of it in the presentation we're going to hear today. But from the highest parts of that river, we're finding plastic, microplastics, that have no source other than the water column. And at the tail end of that river, we're finding plastics that he is pulling much out of the ocean to get rid of it. And we need to continue advocating for that river. So this is where I'm trying to get to here. This is a group founded by basically a group of neighbors. And we're kind of exhausting our energy. And we are looking for further insights and ideas on how to continue the efforts that we've made so far. And it's a big task. So we may want to grow the organization. We may want to hibernate the organization. But we have good bones. We've done a lot of great work over the years. And we'd like to invite all of you to send your ideas to us. And you can find out afterwards how to do that. You can write something. If you write a nice letter with a vision, we'll publish it. And give us some ideas where to go and what to do moving forward. The dilemma is this. There have been many groups advocating for the Deschutes River upstream from Billy Chinook. We may be the last one standing. Now think about that. It's a pretty sad idea, isn't it? Well, we're a pretty good one to be standing, but. Okay, so today, we are going to go on a journey at every level of sea adventure, an ecological adventure with an ecological warrior, a cultural adventure, and I need to warn you, this is pretty compelling. So we do have somebody standing by with seasickness bags. If just raise your hands, and we'll be right there to attend to you. So I'm not going to go any further. Willy, I've heard him give this presentation at a yacht club I belong to. Absolutely fascinating at every level. So Willy Kunkle.
All right, thanks, Chris. Thanks for the nice introduction, and thanks for the tie-in to the river as well. Thanks for all you guys are doing for the river here, because what we're about to see is out in the ocean, but it's all connected. Somebody asked, or somebody mentioned, like, oh, we're like so disconnected from the sea here, like in Crooked River. We're kind of landlocked, but we got the river. But it's it's a problem that affects everybody, whether you are aware of it and see it or not. So thanks very much for all your guys' work to conserve the rivers here as well. So so we're going to talk today about a trip I did a couple years ago in the middle of the pandemic. It was right when COVID was starting. I spent about 7 weeks out in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So we're going to go through what exactly the garbage patch is, how it's formed, and how we were able to collect ghost nets and plastic debris out of the ocean. So this first slide here, this is just a casual talk. I've got a bunch of photos, and I'm just going to kind of tell the story as it happened. So this photo here, this is the ship Kwai up in the upper right, and then right over here, right down here, this is called a ghost net. So this is what we're after on this mission. And I think this photo is really great because it just shows you, this This thing right here is probably 3 tons. It's massive, but it looks tiny. You know, it's a huge ocean, big ship, but there's a lot of these out there. Yeah, we're gonna start with a little video here.
We've just returned from 48 days at sea, where they've brought in a record-setting cargo of ghost nets, derelict fishing gear, and consumer plastics. So they've been removing lots of toxic elements from the ocean.
I'm an avid surfer, waterman, diver on Maui, and I really wasn't aware of the scope of this giant problem. It was really frightening, actually, how much plastic was out there. When you'd look off the boat, it would just be clouds of tiny pieces smaller than your fingernail. And then consumer plastics, marine debris, ghost nets from fishing gear. And then when we would dive on the nets, we'd find turtles, fish, giant tuna. They're all dead, stuck in the nets. It was really disheartening. But the work that Mary Crowley and Ocean Voyages Institute is doing to go out there and actually collect these nets, helping to solve the problem. It's a monumental problem. You realize that when you're out there, because there's plastic everywhere.
It's not easy to find and pick up all this garbage. We use some new technologies like GPS, satellite trackers.
The ship left from Hilo, Hawaii on May 4th. And here it is now returning to Honolulu with over 100 tons of plastic collected from the big garbage patch of the Pacific Ocean. There's so much plastic there to be collected and so much work to do, but this is just the start. What you see on the ship there, that's just what's on deck. The whole, that's a cargo hold is completely full.
Network issues.
It's an honor to have all of these toxic materials out of the ocean. They'll be recycled and repurposed. Nothing will end up in landfill. Nothing will ever go back in the ocean. The ocean is a source of health for us as a planet and for us as human beings, and that we have to take care of it, and we have to have a healthy habitat for ocean creatures. And to do this, we have to change some habits, we have to have much better waste management, and we have to right now be doing lots of ocean cleanup.
Okay. So I think what I would most like you to take from that video was the fact that there's 150 million tons of this stuff out there.
Wow.
We set the world record for ocean cleanup, and we got 100 tons. That's the world record. So there's 149,999. Wait, quick math. 150 million minus 100 tons.
Yeah.
Is still left out there, and it's increasing by 12 million tons per year. So this is a massive problem that we don't really have a solution to yet, and this is kind of the best we've got so far, and it's not good enough. So, yeah. So this is me on the ship. I was actually not the captain of the ship. I was the chief engineer. Yeah, I grew up sailing on the Columbia River. I've logged about 40,000 miles all over the world. I've got my 200-ton master's ticket and engineering certification. Yeah, and as my career for about 12 years, I was captaining boats up to 80 footers and then engineer on larger vessels. Yeah, this is on the deck of the Kwai. So you can tell it's a bit of a pirate ship. So before I was doing this work, I was working on various sailing ships. Yeah, that were kind of like fancier boats, but that big one in the middle I worked on for about 2 years as chief engineer. And on the right there was my engine room. And I only show you that because the engine room on this ship is like spotless. I would keep it immaculate. you know, I could deliver a baby in my engine room. It's so clean, but yeah, the Kwai is like kind of a special ship. Yeah, so this is the boat. A little bit about the boat. It was built in 1953 in Germany, riveted steel, almost 200 tons, 170 feet overall. And it actually used to be a fishing boat. It didn't have masts and sails before, but it was operating in the fjords of Norway and had an engine fire and actually sunk. And I think all the crew died. So as sort of a side note, different presentation. This is an actual ghost ship. It was like they salvaged it and recommissioned it, and now it's and then the current owner put the sails and masts in it and started doing cargo runs with the boat. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because this vessel is uniquely suited to this kind of work at sea, because it's got sails, and so we can, you know, really reduces the amount of fuel we burn. And it being a fishing vessel turned into a cargo vessel, it's got a big cargo hold. You know, so we've got a big area where we can store stuff. And we've also got a 3-ton radial crane to pick up cargo and, you know, 3-ton ghost nets as well. So this is the sail plan. If anybody's interested. any sailors in the room?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Are the sails sufficient to move this boat at a reasonable speed, or do you
Yeah.
pretty much, and what, I mean, could you give me a rough idea?
Yeah,
of what-
yeah, for sure. With enough wind, yeah. If we had about at least 15 knots, 15 to 20 knots, we could sail. Although less than that, then we're motor sailing.
Huh.
Which still, you know, if we're motor sailing, you're still greatly reducing your, you know, your fuel, or increasing your fuel efficiency, reducing the amount of fuel you burn. So, you know, it's a big boat, and it's still, you know, we're not sailing all the time, but it's auxiliary power, and it does add to the fuel efficiency of it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so here's the engine room on the Kwai. No babies being delivered here, but it's, you know, it's very utilitarian. It's not about being pretty, it's about working. It's a working vessel. So we had a 12-cylinder Detroit diesel as the main engine, and then on the left you can see a Cummins 6-cylinder diesel generator, which runs all the hydraulics, which is really important because it's running the crane. And then on the right there's another generator for power. Yeah, so this is us in Hilo Bay. This is right before we took off on the trip. And yeah, just as an aside note, I think I mentioned before, this was right as COVID, the whole COVID thing was happening. This was like May of 2020. So I was working on this ship from January of 2020 up until July of 2020. So I pretty much spent the entire lockdown COVID time just on the ship. So I kind of missed all the quarantine. I mean, we were quarantined on the boat, so. So we were arguably some of the safest people in the world, I guess, at the time. But the rule was, if anybody went from the ship onto land, you weren't allowed back on the ship. Because we were trading, you know, goods in between Hawaii and the South Pacific, and if, you know, we couldn't be responsible for bringing a virus to small island nations in the Pacific. They don't have doctors. And also, yeah, the deck crew here, these are all guys from Kiribati, which is a little island nation in the South Pacific. So it's an interesting ship. It's a very international crew. All the officers are German and American, and there was an Israeli guy, a Hawaiian guy, and then all the deck crew is from Kiribati. And these guys are just amazing. They're like islanders, you know, really strong sailors and fishermen, and just really happy people. So it was really, really a pleasure to work with these guys hand in hand for so long. Yeah, so like I said, the normal function of the ship, it's a cargo ship. And so we would go, this is in Kewalo Basin in Honolulu. We'd load cargo in Honolulu, and then we would take it down to Kiribati.
Hey, Willie, would you check, make sure everybody could hear?
Yeah, can everybody hear okay?
Break out the microphone.
Do we need a microphone? Can everybody hear okay?
That would be good.
Okay. Yeah, so so we load up cargo in Hawaii and then sail down to Kiribati and the Cook Islands, and this is unloading cargo down in Kiribati and Christmas Island. And we're bringing everything from like food and beer and clothes and tires and oil, diesel, gasoline, Budweiser, tablets, you know, like this is how this island nation gets stuff. You know, anything they have, basically we brought in. Yeah, so the kind of behind the times, you know, they're just catching up with the internet and with Facebook and, you know, or I guess Instagram now. But yeah, so it's really interesting to see how, you know, these are like people, it's like looking at people before the internet kind of. So you see a stark contrast on how people are, you know. Yeah, this is more cargo operations. You can see the crane lifting all the goods onto the dock from the ship. Yeah, more unloading. Yeah, we would go to these different islands and have to ferry goods with our aluminum barges. Yeah, you can see all the drums. That's all like gas and diesel. Yeah, we would just put everything on there and take it down to the islands. We would also use the boat as a ferry ship. So down in the islands, between the islands, they don't really have ferries. So when we're down there, we load up passengers, and so at the top left, we're loading up passengers in the cargo net, and then we drop them on the deck. That's how they board the ferry. This is cowboy stuff. This is yeah. And then on the bottom right, you know, we can see we create a tent over the boom, and people camp out under the tent, and it's an overnight trip to the other islands. So it's an interesting operating vessel. Here's the toilet.
No.
So you just sit off the back and hold on and feed the fishies while your friends and coworkers are eating breakfast at the table. It's like eye contact, you know. They're eating their Cheerios, and you can see, you know, your buddy. So those are the kind of conditions we're working with here. Here's us on a cargo run. This is heading back north to Hawaii. Just to give you an idea of kind of the conditions at sea sometimes. This was sailing. This was enough wind to sail.
Are these good conditions or bad conditions?
This is good. Yeah, this is good sailing. A little like, you know, tossed around, but it's good sailing. Right, so the garbage patch. You guys have heard of the garbage patch?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with how it's kind of formed, or like why it's there?
No.
Okay, so yeah, so yeah, I guess a little basic meteorology. You know, you have high pressure systems and low pressure systems. High pressure systems are the stable weather systems. You know, it's a lot of pressure, you know, keeping the cells stable. And high pressure system, as opposed to a low pressure system, is very unstable. That's where you get your bad weather, your depressions, your hurricanes. A hurricane is a low pressure system that builds and builds and builds. Low pressure systems swirl around in a counterclockwise fashion, while high pressure systems swirl around in a clockwise fashion. And so there's pretty much always, in fact always, there's a high pressure system in the North Pacific. You can see this is Hawaii down here, and then this is the coast of California here. This is like the Bay Area. So this is a huge area, and the winds just swirl and swirl and swirl around all the time in a clockwise fashion. And it kind of creates this like funnel effect where everything just swirls to the middle of this high pressure system. And so when we're talking about the garbage patch, or, you know, garbage island, or the gyre, the North Pacific Gyre, which means swirling gyre, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this high pressure system that just collects kind of in a smaller area. So these ghost nets and all this plastic debris tends to just come into, I mean, it's still a huge area, but it kind of centralizes it a little bit. And kind of the big issue, or the big problem to solve is, you know, you hear about the garbage island, and they say, you know, it's the size of Texas, you know, and you kind of picture this like actual like island made of garbage the size of Texas. Well, it's not really like that out there. It's water, and then a lot of the plastic is sitting below the water, and you don't really see it. It's not a one mass, and that makes it really hard to find this stuff because it's a huge ocean, and you know, you could not see anything potentially, especially if it's choppy at all and you just can't see anything under the water. It's like icebergs. So we had to develop a system to actually be able to find, like reliably find the ghost nets. So what Ocean Voyages Institute has done, well actually there's more facts here. So yeah, 95% of this plastic in the ocean is all fishing gear.
Really?
So it's mostly fishing nets. You know, the ghost nets are all fishing nets that glob onto each other. You know, sorting tubs, line, like all sorts of stuff. I've got a lot of photos you'll see, but it's pretty much fishing gear. Right. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. This is a ghost net. So this could be 100 different fishing nets that have been thrown over the side of the ship, and then they just collect in that gyre and then glob onto each other and create this big mass of. You know, you can see there's all the different colors. There's a million different kinds of nets in there.
And is that a person that I'm seeing?
That's a person. Yeah, that's Tetera. He's one of our divers. He's one of the Kiribati deck crew. He's one of our divers. And so, yeah, there's actually two people. This is Tetera here. This is Timatong right there.
Oh, yeah.
And so for scale, you know, you can see how big these things can be. There are smaller ones, but they get really big as well.
Are they intentionally discarded, or is this accidental?
Yeah, most of the time it's intentional.
Really?
And yeah, the fishing industry is like lawless, you know, and there's all sorts of practices out there that, you know, pumping out oil out of the bilge happens all the time. They're all doing it, pumping oil straight into the sea.
Is there only one of these gyres on the planet, or are there other ones?
This is the biggest one because the Pacific Ocean is huge. It's like the biggest kind of uninterrupted water source. So just the scale of it is the biggest. That's a great question. I haven't really heard of another phenomenon like this in the Atlantic or the Indian. As far as I know, this is the main one.
So are there laws about what they discard and they're just not enforced, or if
Yeah.
there's no laws?
Yeah, there are laws, but it's impossible to enforce it. It's just nobody looking, and it's a really big ocean. You know, and there's just no way to enforce it really. Yeah, there's a lot of really, really terrible practices out there. Oops. So you can see this one that's a big one. It's probably the size of a school bus there, maybe bigger. That's me on the bottom left. You can see for scale. I'm not a small guy. And this is it's a pretty big ghost net here. You know, we find this is a turtle shell. We find there's all kinds of marine life that gets trapped in these nets. And the turtle, you know, gets trapped in a net, and there's nothing, you know, it's just gonna die. Very, very sad. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. This is like, you can see the surface of the water there, and it's just a little bit you can see. It's like an iceberg, you know, but under the surface of the water, it's huge, you know.
Are you picking it up on like a sonar or anything like that? Can you pick it up on that before you actually get to that
Not really,
spot?
not really. No, they're too submerged. But I'll get into how we do find them in a second. Right, so Ocean Voyages Institute is the organization. They raise money and then they charter the ship and fund the whole program. Yeah, so the whole operation is funded by Ocean Voyages Institute, and we partner with the University of Hawaii, University of California, San Diego, and University of Washington. Yeah, the directive is just to collect as many ghost nets and plastic debris as we could, departing from Hilo, and we were out there for 7 weeks, but we didn't know how long we were going to be out there for. It was basically until we ran out of funding. It was an open-ended trip, just until, you know, and they were also, while we were out there, still fundraising. And so we went until we were either out of money or the cargo hold was full, which ended up being about 7 weeks. Alright, so we went over North Pacific High. So here is how, to answer your question, how we actually found the ghost nets. So what Ocean Voyages Institute does is they have these tracking, like GPS tracker buoys, these little white balls here, and they take, so there's like cruising sailors that are sailing across the ocean. And so this organization will give these cruising sailors like a GPS tracker buoy. And if any of these sailors come across a ghost net or any kind of debris or anything, they can tag it. And then now we have a GPS location on these ghost nets. So we had about 25 or 30 of these things out there connected, hopefully connected to a ghost net. And so once we had that, it turns, now we have all these buoys, we can actually, we actually have a location that we can follow. So on shore, it's,
how long have you been measuring all of this?
measuring what exactly
Measuring the dirt, the plastic, the.
Yeah. Me personally, or how long has it been?
Universally.
That's a really good question. I think it's been known as a problem for a long time. I mean, I remember myself, I did a sail from Gig Harbor, Washington over to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii a couple years ago on a
When
36.
was that?
That was in 2018 or 17. And I remember like really specifically on that trip, we sailed south basically as far as San Diego and then headed west to Hawaii, and pretty much like between San Diego and Hawaii, it was just constant stream of garbage.
Yeah, because it's all relatively new. I've been sailing all my life.
Yep.
And been everywhere
Yeah.
on every ocean, spending
Cool.
years.
Cool.
And we never came across
Yeah.
garbage
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because I agree that it does exist, and it's something to really pay attention to, but it's something new.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, like I said, that trip in 2017, 2018, I'd done a lot of sailing before then, and you see stuff out there, but that was, to me, that was when I was like, oh, this is really bad.
So was that a pleasure trip, and then you really began to realize what a problem there is?
Yeah, exactly. It was a delivery. I was helping a friend move his boat. He was being restationed in the Navy from Gig Harbor to Pearl Harbor. And it was basically the entire Pacific. I just remember, it was just constant garbage and plastic and,
how far off the Pacific? Or how far off land?
Not far. 100 miles maybe.
Yeah.
Pretty much constant. And I've done a lot of sailing in the Mediterranean also, and it's a real big problem in the Mediterranean. All these really beautiful Mediterranean coves and islands, it's just garbage everywhere. Really
Same
sad.
kind of garbage, nets?
I mean,
and stuff like
that was more like consumer plastics and consumer garbage in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
This is all fishing gear.
Right.
So it's a slightly different thing, but it's the same problem. It's just kind of everywhere now. It's just garbage everywhere.
How do you recruit those, I guess, individual ships
Yeah.
that take those buoys or whatever
Yeah.
to tag the masses of garbage or nets?
Yeah, that is what Ocean Voyages Institute does. Which I don't work for them, I work for the ship, and we were chartered by OBI. So I'm not exactly sure how they did it, but they're connected with, the owner of that organization is connected with a lot of cruising sailors.
Okay.
And sailors, like, people want help. Especially if you're a sailor and you spend a lot of time at sea and you see the problem and the ocean is precious to you, people are looking for ways to help. And so, I think people feel empowered when they can help in a certain way. And it's like a fun mission, they're out there sailing and oh, here's a ghost net, let's tag it. And it's like it's like, it feels cool, and you helped out in this operation.
Right.
I think people like that.
If there's, it would seem to be kind of an insidious problem that grows over time. And
Yeah.
it's understandable that somebody who spent a lot of time in the water might not realize it because like you've indicated, the mass of it is below
Yeah.
the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So you might see a few things floating and then years go by and you don't realize that
Yeah.
the scope of the problem, right?
Sure. Yeah, and you can, a lot of times you can only see it when it's really flat and really calm.
Yeah,
If the wind picks up to more than 5 or 10 knots and it gets a little choppy, you don't see it. So
right.
So Willie, I think the other thing we need to keep in mind, most of you are way too young to remember this, but in the movie The Graduate,
Yeah.
there was one word for his future career, and that was plastics, and that basically defined the end of World War II industrial efforts. So we're talking about phenomena that's 70 years old,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of other fish is in the ocean and sinks to the bottom.
yeah.
But this all floats, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little different in character in terms of
Yes.
how it builds up and affects the water there. But it is not a 200-year-old phenomenon.
No.
No.
It's new.
Right, it's,
It's
you know,
new.
ask an older person about The Graduate, they'll tell you.
So I think if the area where it's the worst congregation of the nets and things is not typically an area where scuba divers are going a lot
Nope.
recreationally.
No,
That's
it's
my-
deep, deep, deep water.
Yeah,
Very deep
so
water.
places where scuba divers are, they would see that stuff more often and.
Yeah, I mean, scuba divers also see it, I think, as well. But yeah, we're talking like deep ocean. Yeah, it's not scuba
It's
diving.
only sailing, ships that are sailing out in that area for business or pleasure would have reason to even see those.
Yeah, and you know, like on small boats sailing across the ocean, you wouldn't actually go through the gyre either. The gyre is what creates, or the high pressure system is what creates the trade winds.
Yeah.
So generally when you're sailing, you sail around with the winds as well, so you might not even see it then.
And the current, those big white lines, that's the main current that
Yes.
defines the edge of it. You wanna be in that current if you're
Yeah.
going from one place to
Oh,
another.
no.
Exactly. So yeah, so now we have all these buoys out here with the GPS coordinates, that now we can actually go out there and just head straight for it. And the idea is if we find one, there's going to be more ghost nets in the area. That's the idea. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, there was a couple of buoys we would go to track and it was just the buoy, it had fallen off a net, or
What's the government doing?
the government had nothing to do with this voyage at all. I'm not sure what they're doing. This is all privately funded. So yeah, so once we approach, so this is our method basically. Once we approach the GPS coordinates, we send the crew up into the rigging, up in the standing rigging, and then they're out there with binoculars and polarized lenses so they can see through the water and hopefully spot, you know, they're just scanning the water, looking for any ghost nets out there. And like I said before, if there's any kind of chop on the water, any wind more than 5 or 10 knots, it's really hard to spot them because it's ripply and you just can't see it. So it's got to be very calm, which also means we're not sailing. It's-
Do you ever use drones? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, we did. We had a drone out there, and we were trying to you know, do search patterns with the drones, but it was even that it was really hard to spot them. Yeah, we had that idea, and we got a lot of drone footage for like the videos and stuff, but it wasn't that effective in actually spotting them as effective as we were hoping. Because once you zoom out, once it flies high enough to see a big area, then the ghost net is tiny. You can't really see it. And then once you bring it down to where you can actually see the ghost nets, then you're only looking at a very small area, and it's kind of pointless. Good idea.
Technology
Yeah,
will improve.
totally. Yeah, get better cameras on there. It'll get higher image resolution for sure. But that's a really good thought. Yeah. So once we get, so the guys up in the rigging are spotting the ghost net, and then with the radio they're calling down to the deck and steering. You know, telling the whoever's on the helm where to steer to actually get to the ghost net. And then we approach as close as we can, not too close though. And then we have these grappling hooks that once we get close enough, then we throw the grappling hook out and catch the net. And the reason we don't want to get too close is because there's a lot of trailing ropes and lines that will get foul in the prop, which actually happened. We had to dive down and get the prop unfouled. But yeah, so this is another example. I don't know if you can actually see, but that's it right there.
Yeah.
The whole thing is probably this big. You know, so this is very hard to spot out there.
Did you develop on the trip for the guys in the rigging something that they would sing out when they saw one, like there she blows?
It wasn't anything official, but we definitely had fun with it. And you know, we kind of had to like make this up as we went, because this was only the second voyage. You know, the first voyage was I think a year or two before. They got 40 tons, but this is still brand new stuff, and we didn't really know the best way to go about it. So this is the best plan that we came up with, and it seemed to work pretty well. The grappling hooks. Yeah, so here's a couple there, getting close and then snag it, and then you can pull it to the ship with the engine in neutral, and it's safe. And each net is completely different. It's different size, different weight, different materials, different types of nets. So each one is a little bit different of a problem to solve. Yeah, here's some of those from below the water. Yeah, so generally we would try to get a diver in the water and get like a big strop around it so we could hook it with the crane. Some are small enough to where we can hand pull it in, but they're soaked with water, so they get
The densities.
really, yeah, they get really, really heavy. So yeah, here's divers in the water, and they just kind of try to get a strap around it, or get a hook on whatever they can. But like each one is slightly different and a little bit different to figure out. There's a couple more. We can.
Whale.
Yeah, they're huge. Yeah, this one on the left we were doing by hand because it was kind of smaller. I think that one on the right was also, that was a hand one.
Do you folks all, for every bunch you pull out of there, you pick out all the dead fish, sea life, and throw it back, or do you just put the whole thing down?
Yeah, if we can.
Huh?
Yeah, if we can. There's a lot of live sea life as well as crabs and tiny fish.
Yeah.
So we would try to get those back in the water.
But the dead ones, so you take them out? So
Yeah,
carry
if you
them
can.
away.
Yeah, because we had to just leave it all on deck and then chop it up and put it in bags, and so it would get real smelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple more here. And like you can see, they're just, each one is kind of its own little creature. It's like very, very different, and every one is just probably, I don't know, there might be 200 different nets in that one. It's really hard to say. So that is the ghost net. So the other thing we're talking about here is just the random debris and microplastic that's floating around out there as well. So this is the other half of the issue, and we've all heard about microplastics now. This is how it looks on the water. It's like kind of like a sheen. These are like very, very tiny particles, and you get to these areas and it's just like this like film almost over the water. And so when we would find, this wasn't everywhere, but when we would run into an area or find a lot of concentration of microplastics and debris, we'd get the dinghy out, the tender, and cruise around with buckets and try to scoop everything up and take everything back to the boat that we could. So this is just some of the random stuff we would find. On the left here, this is my buddy Yeye. He's from the town called Banana on Christmas Island.
I love it.
And then on the right, this is a big sorting tub. It's like the size of a hot tub almost. I think we
was
picked.
found out there.
Yeah, I think we found 5 of those out there. We found about 5 of those out there. And this, I'm not even sure what that is, but that's a big thing. You can see on the right, those guys are coming back with a big, some kind of haul. Yeah, so we would spend hours out there just picking everything up and chucking it back on the boat and throwing it on the deck. A lot out there. Yeah, sometimes we'd have to get creative. That's Yakuba. I think they're hanging off the side, trying to scoop something up. You just have to get real close to some stuff and just kind of like pick it up if you could. Yeah, so you can tell it's just so much stuff, and basically we would load the top of the cargo hold, and then once it was full, we'd have to chop it all up, put it into bags, and clear it. And so I think we probably did that 15 times. You know, so everything you see here on the top, that's like one load. You know, and then we would get rid of it all and start again. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is a Japanese float we found. It's pretty cool. It's like that big. Totaro snagged that one with a broom, hanging off the side.
Creativity.
Yeah. This doesn't fly on commercial ships. Believe it or not. This is cowboy stuff. We found half of a trimaran, like a 60-foot trimaran.
What's a trimaran?
A trimaran is it's a 3-hulled boat. Like,
Okay.
you've heard of a catamaran with like
Yeah.
the 2 pontoons.
Sure.
Trimaran has 3.
Okay.
It was anchored off of one of the Hawaiian islands and was blown off in a storm. Just been floating around for, I think it was 5 years at that point.
So you took that back with you?
We tried.
Okay.
We spent a whole day trying to get this thing onto the ship, but we couldn't.
Yeah.
It was too big. It was waterlogged. You know, we were like, oh, can we chop it up? We didn't have any underwater chainsaws. That would have been a thing. But, it was just it was too much, and we really tried. We were like, oh, can we tow it? You know, but we just couldn't. It was impossible. But just to show you, yeah, like on the top right, you can see our diver there. You can see how deep it goes. It was, I think it was probably about 50 feet, 60 feet. But yeah, just floating around out there. Yeah, so this is how we would process everything. You know, once we filled up the top, everybody gets out there with knives and we're just cutting everything up because you know it's all kind of globbed together. And we stuff it in these bags, and then you know that's a whole day processing and chopping everything up. A couple hours, and then we tuck it down into the cargo hold, and on the bottom right there, that's you know as the cargo hold is beginning to be filled. I think by the time we were done, it was pretty full. We did a pretty good job.
Why do you bag it?
Why?
Yes.
Just to make it easier to handle and to process, and you know, because we had to offload it into containers later, so it has to be collected. You know, otherwise, you know, it's shallow containers, like there's like tentacles all over it, and it gets smelly, and just got to be contained.
Okay.
And you know, we otherwise you just have to drop the stuff into the cargo hold loose and.
Kind of a means to compact it a little bit.
Yeah, so, yeah, and then put it all neatly. So it's not just a big garbage pile. Yep, some more bags filling up. The guys having fun there. Yeah, so now we'll go through all the marine life we would see out there. On the left there, that's a big squid, a giant. Like this thing was probably that big around, and like I don't know, a couple, 3-4 feet, really big. And it had been eaten by sharks or fish or whatever. But it was an interesting one. Yeah, all kinds of tuna and fish. You find these little crabs everywhere. These little sea stars.
So you guys ate pretty well then?
Yeah, the squid was great. That was really good calamari. Yeah, we find. I think we only found one turtle, but that was like heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That really hurt. Seeing that. All sorts of sad marine life gets caught in there. Yeah, so like I mentioned before, we were partnered with UCSD, University of Hawaii, and University of Washington. And so while we were out there, they gave us these instruments to deploy. And so these instruments are tracking all sorts of stuff. They're tracking ocean currents, ocean temperatures, pH balance. And I think what they're trying to figure out is like, with all this plastic out there, there's like bacteria and like little organisms that grow on it. And what they're finding is, trash that starts in the United States and ends up in Japan, or vice versa. In Japan it ends up in the States. It's carrying these microorganisms and bacteria. And now, it's kind of like the smallpox thing, where now you're getting these new bacteria and microorganisms in places that they haven't had it before, and they can destroy entire ecosystems. So these are collecting a lot of data on, just
So a
what's
lot
going
of
on.
research for all kinds of things go on the
Yeah.
ships too.
Exactly. Yeah. And
So-
yeah.
Is
Hope-
the,
yeah.
is the information sent back remotely, or do they have to then go back and check these?
I think it's sent back remotely. I'm not, I couldn't answer that. We were just deploying them for them. I'm not a scientist myself, believe it or not. But I think it's just getting relayed through satellites probably.
The question about nets, since plastics have only been around a little less than 100 years, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nets before plastic, nets are now plastic.
Yeah. They
But
used to be.
before that, they would have been made of like,
Natural fibers.
or something.
Yeah.
They weren't a problem 200 years ago because they degraded,
Exactly.
and now they don't.
Exactly. That's the problem. They're all plastic now, which doesn't degrade. They used to be natural fiber or rope, and it would just jute and hemp, I think, and a lot of different types of fabric. But they would eventually degrade and go away. And that's what plastic is good at not doing.
Yeah.
And so it just sticks around. And a lot of plastics and a lot of the line and nets are designed to float. That's the point of a lot of certain types of ropes is to float. And so it just doesn't go away. And it's a combination of the plastics and the lawlessness of the fishing industry. Right, so as I mentioned, we set the world record for ocean cleanup, which seemed like 103 tons is a lot of material, but like we were talking about before, it's just a drop in the bucket. So we landed back in Honolulu here, offloaded all of the debris and ghost nets, and I think we filled about 5 shipping containers full of material. And so it was really important for OVI that we didn't just take all the plastic out of the ocean and put it back in the landfill. So one of the things that they're really good at is making sure that all the plastic is repurposed and it's reused, and it's not just going from the ocean into the land now. So it was used for housing insulation. There's a lot of art projects that use repurposed stuff, and then I guess there's like an experimental fuel that you can break it down to and create fuel. So that was like a really big part of what the organization does, is figure out what to do with all this stuff. So it's not just another problem somewhere else. So all these beautiful photos here were from Jackson. He's a really amazing photographer. I just wanted to give him big credit. This is really, to me, the photos tell the story. Really striking, and it's he did a fantastic job.
Was he on the voyage with you the whole entire time?
He was, yeah, all 7 weeks. And he's a diver, he's a surfer, so he was in the water. We'd get on a net. I don't know if you noticed the shots from the water, under the ship and under the. Oh yeah, he was hopping in, and he's a real strong swimmer, and so he was getting down there and getting the really good shots. And there's a couple in here I think could be in National Geographic. Really, really good photography.
What were the ocean temperatures recovering?
That's a really good question. I think it was between 40 to 50 around there.
Wow.
But that is a good question.
Those guys were in there without wetsuits.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really cool guys. This is about how you guys can get involved if you like. I don't work for Ocean Voyages Institute, so I'm not gonna ask you guys for money or anything like that. But if you did want to get involved, that's where you go. I have nothing to do with them, so if you did feel like donating money, this is the website you would go to.
And did I see some pamphlets up front?
No, not for this. That's a good idea though. I should get that. Thanks. I'm gonna make a note of that.
Willie, was this was a unique event where OVI contracted this ship
Yeah.
and your crew
Yeah.
to do this first time big thing.
Yeah.
Are they gonna do it again?
Yeah, since then, I know they've gone out at least one more time. They asked me to go, but I wasn't able to do it at the time. I just got married, so I'm not really working at sea anymore. I know they did it at least one or two more times, and they're just kind of constantly fundraising. And there is, I know of one other ship they have that does this kind of work as well. I don't know how closely it compares to what exactly we were doing. But
Is OVI also doing public education
I believe
like
so.
this sort of thing?
You know, that's a good question. I believe so. Mary Crowley is OBI founder, and she's always out there getting on radio programs and trying to get on TV.
And have you folks just thought about taking this to Washington and harnessing the government to get them involved?
Yeah, I mean, you know, to be.
Do you watch the news?
Explosive question.
Just
right?
wondering.
Yeah.
You know, I actually reached out to OVI and said I put a presentation together. I'd like to go around and get it out there, and I didn't hear anything back. You know, so I'm kind of going rogue. So I just put it together, and I'm just trying to get it out there myself. I hope there's other people.
Get it out on PBS stations all over the country, yeah.
This is part of the problem is it's all international waters and no one wants to take responsibility. for it.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's nobody to enforce it. So, yeah.
Willie, do you know of any other, especially fishing country like Japan,
Yeah.
that also has these kinds of programs to get out there and clean up?
Yeah, I haven't heard
I'm sure
any.
they're just as big a contributor
Oh,
as
yeah.
any other country.
Oh, yeah.
Our country doesn't either.
Yeah.
These are private individuals.
Well, that's
Mhm,
true.
mhm.
But my cousins have a place in Hawaii and they do a cleanup they're on Kona, but they
Okay.
do, every year they do with
Cool.
Ocean Defenders, they do
Okay.
a big
Oh,
cleanup
cool.
there.
Awesome. Okay.
And it looks like what you're showing there, the same kind of
Oh, cool.
tires and
Okay.
fishing nets.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
but not enough.
What was the
Yeah.
biggest thing that surprised you out there?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing that surprised me is how not visible it is, how invisible. You know, there's so much out there, and it's wild what you don't see. You know, and I think that's a big part of the problem. Is it's really hard to see the problem with your eyes.
So what's the first thing that jumps into your mind as the answer to this?
Yeah, that's a very good
I
question.
mean, you've got something that has no value or minimal value to the people who use it, all the fishing gear.
Yeah.
Because if it costs them anything, they'd go and get those nets back.
Right.
Or all these other tubs and the rest of that.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's not, it doesn't matter, it doesn't
Yeah.
impact their bottom line enough.
Yeah, exactly. And no one's looking, you know, so
Yeah.
kick overboard or pump the oil overboard, and no one's, there's nobody to say anything.
And how do we measure the cost, the problem? I mean, because you could know how many, tons, you said there are 500 million tons of this out there, is
I
that
think
what
it
you
said
said?
150 million tons. Yeah.
Oh, 150
Yeah,
million
so
tons,
big.
okay,
Yeah.
that's, quite a bit.
Which is still a
But
lot.
no. Oh, it's a lot, but given perspective, I don't know how much of a percentage of the ocean that covers. And so
Yeah.
that's one thing.
Yeah.
Is it a pollution to the ocean in other ways, like you mentioned, the bacteria?
Yeah.
And what percentage of the fish does it, you know, are there any fish that are endangered of being extinct because of this problem?
Mhm.
I mean, those are things that you have to get together if you're gonna convince a Congress to
Yeah.
put money into something like that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's the problem of marine life and fish dying into ghost nets, but there's also, you know, there's overfishing. There's a lot of overfishing going on.
Yeah.
You know, fish that are intentionally caught with the nets.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on where
Yeah.
people, you know.
Well, and I think, maybe most of us have seen programs about beaches where surfers, that's what they do sometimes in their downtime, cause they show up at a beach to go surfing, and it's totally covered
Yeah.
with garbage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from Lake Tahoe, and they weren't doing it at the time, but they an annual, kind of like this, where they go through the entire lake, which is huge, and pulling out trash and tires and down boats and you name it. It's not just the oceans that are having issues too.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, the fact that it's plastic doesn't go away and we just keep making more and more and more plastic, and so where does it go?
So it's a good time to mention this, we do cleanups of the river, right over there. In your neighborhood, you can show up, we advertise them well. Jeff leads a lot of them, but we sometimes work to get, assets there like pickup trucks and things so we can load them up and get stuff out. So if you wanna participate in any of that, please let us know.
So, Chris, you must know the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. The Upper Deschutes Watershed Council? Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you didn't think there were any organizations working on our rivers.
Well,
They do.
the
a
Watershed
huge- Can I just
Councils
say
are.
something?
Oh, go ahead.
So they do a lot of work for the White Shoes Creek and the
Right.
Deschutes, and they host a giant river cleanup
Okay.
every year, huge. And they get search and rescue folks out there in their scuba gear, and they're doing a lot. So I'm not sure why you didn't.
So what I
mention
was
them.
saying, there were no strict advocacy conservation groups for the river. The watershed councils are almost always heavily involved with the irrigators. And the
Not
irrigators
the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council.
are not pure advocates for the river, so.
No.
So
My wife's been on the board for 25 years, so, you know, we're pretty familiar. So it might be a good idea for
Well-
people to look into their work. That'd be great.
It would be good, that's a good thing to do. You know, another thought experiment to do is just, probably these nets aren't 100% of the nets they use every year. They're the ones that were lost or damaged and not functioning any longer. And so you can extrapolate from that of how many nets are out in the ocean. And how much fishing is going on and what pressure we're putting on the oceans to get those fish out as a product for us to eat. And I got one other real quick question. Just, cause somebody mentioned this before, if you threw a piece of plastic in the river out here, where does it go in the ocean?
Would be, I mean, that would end up in the ocean.
Well, there's a lot of places that get trapped on the way, but let's just say it makes it over every hurdle, where's it going to the ocean?
You mean if it makes it over the Astoria bar?
Yeah, it makes it
Follow
over
the
the
lines on that chart, it gets into the cycle, whether the individual piece does.
So you saw where San Francisco was on that map? So I don't know how far we are from San Francisco, 700 miles, go up the west coast 700 miles, and that's where our plastic enters the ocean would be in the Columbia River.
Did you ever see, common plastic bottles tangled up in these nets?
A little bit, but that was actually another thing I think I was surprised about, I was surprised with how much consumer plastics we didn't see. I was expecting to find more straws and bottles and all sorts of stuff, but it was fishing gear. Really interesting.
And what was the most, maybe this could be the last question and then we'll let you, be on your way. What was the most interesting or unusual, deceased probably, wildlife that you found entangled in there? I could see the tuna and so on.
Yeah,
but
the
what was
turtle or the squid.
Oh, okay.
And the little sea stars were really interesting too. They're like little black stars that like crawl around everywhere there.
Like its own little ecosystem.
Totally.
So there's a cultural part to this presentation, it's not quite over yet.
Right, so.
Oh.
These are the Kiribati guys on the back of the ship. They're always singing songs. actually on a cargo run. This wasn't on the plastic boat. We have about 10. Look at this kid. It's really hard to be in a bad mood working with these guys. These guys are really the heart and soul of that ship. Very, very special.
Looks like you had a few days.
They're Kiribati. Kiribati. They're from an island called Kiribati, which is 1,200 miles due south of Hawaii.
Okay.
And these people, it's like working with these people. You know, they didn't have the internet. They didn't grow up with the internet, and so working with these guys, they were happy. They're connected. You know, they're constantly working together and singing together. You know, they're working in the equatorial sun, slugging around heavy bags of coconut and, you know, cheering and singing along, and like it was amazing to see that, and made me feel sad for us.
How did you happen to pick up with these guys?
With the ship?
No, these guys, how did you get those guys?
So these guys, they're basically always on the ship. So we trade between Hawaii and Kiribati, and so the ship itself has a really strong connection with Kiribati, and so the entire deck crew is from Kiribati. And so these guys come on the ship and they make $20 a day, and they go back to Kiribati and they're the kings of the island. They really are. They go back there and they're the guy. Like everybody wants to be these guys.
Well, they are heroes.
They're the heroes. They're for sure the heroes. So.
What's the population of the island?
Oh, a couple thousand, not that much.
Yeah, so
One
these
flush
guys
toilet.
have all known each other since they were born.
Yeah.
They
Oh
all
yeah.
went to school together.
Yes.
They're probably all gonna die together.
Yeah.
They're gonna get married together.
They do everything
together.
They work as a pack. Everything they do together. They build their houses together. They weave banana leaves together. Like every single thing is as a pack.
It's a community.
Yeah, it's a real community. It's really beautiful. It makes me sad to see what we've lost in
Yeah.
society.
So was the trip north to the Gyre then, was that kind of a special run for them, that they
Yeah.
got out of their routine a little bit?
Yeah, totally.
Did something different?
Yeah, because the normal operation is running cargo between Hawaii and the South Pacific. That's what the ship normally does. And these garbage trips, they're like a special. Whenever OVI raises enough money, they'll go out. Well, thanks so much, you guys. I really appreciate it.